Namaskar and welcome to Indian Diplomacy, show on India's national broadcaster Doordarshan about Indian foreign policy, India's international relations, and key developments in different regions of the world that have an impact on India's economy and security. Viewers, this is an episode where we are doing a deep dive into a country that is a synonym for turmoil, crisis, and violence for a long time, and which seems to be sinking deeper and deeper. This is Myanmar or Burma. The crisis in Myanmar is worsening as we speak, and it's a multi-sided armed conflict as well as a struggle for the future of the country being waged by different players. Why is this endless series of wars affecting Myanmar, and what are the major stakes for external players, both for India and also for others in this critical country? This is the theme of the discussion today. And I'm privileged to introduce you to a domain expert and a scholar who's joining me in the studio today, Dr. Rami Desai. She's an anthropologist and has worked in this region bordering India's northeast and Myanmar, has spent time inside Myanmar, and has written extensively about the country and its travails for a long time. She's a distinguished fellow at one of the leading think tanks of the country, India Foundation. Dr. Desai, welcome to Indian Diplomacy.
Thank you so much, Sreeram. Thank you for having us. It's a privilege to be on your show.
Crisis in Myanmar, of course, go a long way back in time. There are at least 6 decades of this confrontation between entrenched military rule and a wide, array of separatist or democracy protesters and violent, non-violent. You can think about this as a, state versus non-state armed groups as well as non-violent groups. This struggle has been going on for a long time.
Correct.
So, but if you look at the present juncture, especially the last 4 or 5 years, we hear and we see that it seems like this has worsened a lot, and that this is some kind of a, we're maybe on a tipping point, and people are saying that the country might break up, and that the military is losing its hold. So, if you were to compare it to earlier phases of these struggles, what is new or what is different this time in this current phase of the crisis in Myanmar as you see it?
So that's a really good opening question, Sreeram, because, there is a difference. And I think we have to recognize that difference for what it is. The Tatmadaw today has, since 2021, regained control of what was a democratically elected country, until 2021, which was led by Aung San Suu Kyi and her party NLD. We know that there has been this struggle, this revolution that has happened since the inception of Burma, Myanmar. And it's always been constant. One of the major reasons for that is that unlike in India, where the armed forces are seen as forces of the people, in Myanmar, it's almost like the forces own the country. It's a very crucial part, a very critical part of Myanmar in terms of, even in the constitution, which is now the latest constitution of 2008, 25% of the seats are with the armed forces. So they are not only involved in a government way, but even in the society. So there's never been a point where the military has not been involved in Myanmar. However, the difference between the previous revolutions and this revolution, I think the singular most important difference would be that there isn't a cohesive bond between the resistance, and there isn't a leader like Aung San Suu Kyi. Previously there was Aung San Suu Kyi who brought the resistance together. This time it's almost like it's a little bit fragmented. You do have the National Unity Government, which was formed post the 2021 regime change. However, National Unity Government, which works in exile, does not include all the ethnic armed organizations fighting against the Tatmadaw. So there is fragmentation in the resistance, and it is without a formidable leader.
And sometimes, in fact, talking of fragmentation, sometimes you have a situation where the armed groups themselves are fighting each other.
Yes.
And so it's much more complex. It's not just state versus these groups, but also some groups vying for influence. And this brings me to the other question, and you as an anthropologist are best positioned to explain this. ethnic identity or tribal loyalties, these seem to be very, very deeply entrenched there. Where is the Burmese nationalism or the Myanmarese nationalism at all? It looks like we obviously the nation building project has failed under military dictatorship for long, long, long time, but it looks like there's just nothing holding the country together as one people. Where is the unity and diversity? For example, India, we have a very stable, society and state because there's a unity and diversity. We all, at the end of the day, no matter which ethnic or religious group we are from, we believe we are Indians, right? So that sentiment seems to be lacking or has not been allowed to flourish. What is your take on this? This whole politicization of ethnic identity, and why is it such a primary factor there?
I think primarily it's because one of the largest ethnic communities, like the Bamars, as you know, who are they form the largest numbers in the Tatmadaw, in the government services, in the leadership, have always been seen as dominant. The minute one group is seen as dominant and the other groups are not, it starts to become problematic in any country. One ethnic identity has all the power, has control, also has, if I may say so, a superiority complex, that we are more refined than the others. There are little nuances if you go into it, that, there'd be some communities, like let's say the Arakanis for that matter. There'd be some Bamars who'd make fun of their accents. There's this sort of little underlying conflict or tensions, if I may say so. But having said that, one of the problems, I think, also is that there are so many little ethnic groups and communities. Like at this point, we have 200 ethnic armed organizations.
200
over.
Yeah.
You're not even able to count them. And they have control of certain amount of territory, and the Tatmadaw has control over a certain amount of territory. The Tatmadaw believes in a unified Myanmar, whereas again, the ethnic armed organizations, and this is where the layered complexities come in. The ethnic armed organizations, not all of them believe in being independent. There are some who believe in a unified Myanmar as well. There are some who don't. So it entirely depends on how their leadership also manipulates the political situation, or what their historical experience has been with the Bamars as well. So I think all these components play a role in the situation that we see today. Also, we must remember, Sreeram, that earlier on there used to be this sort of there wasn't the kind of social media, the kind of international interest that we see today. There wasn't the kind of political interest, external political interest that we see today. Even communities weren't so politically alive to their own situation. Today, all of this exposure has made the conflict and the divisions in society far greater than they were.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So it's a different era, same problem, but magnified due to so many changes. The other point I wanted to bring up with you, you already mentioned Aung San Suu Kyi, and for a long time the world's attention on Myanmar was centered around this great matriarch, this figure, the leader of the democracy movement. You mentioned that there was a brief spell where she even, quote unquote, shared some power with the military, but now she's again back in detention, and she's aging, and we don't know whether she'll ever be able to come back again out. She spent so many years behind closed doors. So in her absence, or as she fades away, what is the hope for any democracy or democratization at all?
If I was to be really candid, and I will be on your show, I think democracy in the classical sense is difficult. I think democracy in the classical sense in a lot of the countries, not just in Myanmar, but even around Myanmar, are far and few. So to expect the kind of democracy that we maybe see in the West, that we see in India, very robust, very participatory, very inclusive, might be difficult. Having said that, recently the Tatmadaw has confirmed that there would be elections. The elections would take place around February of next year. Of course, it is incumbent on whether there would be some amount of stability in the country or not, because you have to be able to conduct elections across. Right now, out of 330 townships, they're saying that there would be elections in about 110. That is not really a comprehensive election, but it would be. NLD, which was Aung San Suu Kyi's party, has not registered for the elections. Of course, if you ask NLD workers, they'll say that they were not allowed to register, but we don't know where the truth is between the two. So they will not be participating. There are some smaller other political groups that will be participating from these ethnic armed organization controlled areas. So, for example, there's a small political group from Rakhine State that will be participating. So there are some groups like this that will be participating. There will also be the participation of the USDP. USDP is considered the military-backed political party,
right?
And in my opinion, the chances are that they will
be made to win.
Yeah, they'll win, because if it's 110 townships, not 330, and the other parties aren't as formidable as they are, then the chances are that they will come to power. Now, when we also look at all of these ethnic armed organizations in the territories that are controlled by them, may I also remind our viewers that when we talk about what is control, it's not just about geographical territorial control. It's also about populations, right? Now, most of these areas that are controlled by ethnic armed organizations, because of the lack of basic necessities, no electricity, no industry, the populations have moved out. So a large amount of exodus has been back into Yangon, which is Tatmadaw controlled. So even if you were to do elections in a lot of these areas, you won't find the kind of population that...
The electorate is scattered now. Yeah.
The electorate is scattered, So these are going to be issues that we are going to counter. But I think if at least elections, in my opinion, at least if elections happen, that is one step forward.
Yeah, so elections and democracy always controversial in Myanmar, and we'll have to see how participative and competitive they will be under military thumb. But talking of this, let's look at external players now for some time. The Western countries, the US, the EU especially, they have been insisting forever that elections and democracy must be restored, and that, they have historically been great supporters of Aung San Suu Kyi, although over the Rohingya issue they fell out in recent years. But they also have an interest, it seems, in increasing Chinese influence in Myanmar. So and to some extent they have dangled aid and other things in the past during the transition period, but now again they're back to economic sanctions. So Western policies and approaches, many people in the region are also critical of what the West is doing there, but are they players at all, and can they still influence the junta and or some of the armed groups on the ground? US and EU, especially the US, because always historically they've played a role, but I'm not so sure if they're still so relevant or influential. So what do you think is happening there with what is the Western push all about, and how do you assess their role there?
I think that's a very important factor, the international influence in the situation that we see unfolding now in Myanmar. Because historically, the Tatmadaw and the US governments, whoever they may have been, have never gotten along. Having said that, the Tatmadaw and the Chinese have never got along either. But, when situations happen, sometimes enemies need to become friends. And we have seen over the past 2 years that China has now gained influence in Myanmar, not just with the ethnic armed organizations, but also with the Tatmadaw. We saw the rise of the Three Brotherhood Alliance in the northern areas, which was an alliance of three ethnic armed organizations that were backed by the Chinese to push the Tatmadaw to shut down the gambling units and the cyber scam units that were in the northern regions of Myanmar and affecting China. Once the Tatmadaw backed down and did what the Chinese asked them to, the Tatmadaw and the Chinese built bridges. Now they work hand in hand as well. One of the classic examples has happened, I think, a month and a half or 2 months ago, wherein the Three Brotherhood Alliance, on their own volition, had extended up to a very major town of Lashio, which was very close to the Tatmadaw, which was a Tatmadaw controlled area and very close to other major towns. Um, on the behest of the Tatmadaw, the Chinese exerted their influence on the ethnic armed organizations that had uh, exerted their presence into Lashio and made them withdraw. To make ethnic armed organizations withdraw on the behest of the Tatmadaw shows you the kind of
Wow.
influence that the
The
Chinese
Chinese
have.
also.
Number two, we must also recognize the fact that the Chinese have investments in Myanmar. Of course, the Indians have investments too, but the Chinese need to protect their investments. They put in a lot of money. The Chapru port is functional. They have ambitions of a railway line which hasn't started as yet, but it will go
One time
from.
they spoke about China-Myanmar economic corridor.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. So this is all a part of that, and it'll go right up till Kunming, Yunnan region. So it goes right across Myanmar. So they have investments in many, many areas, but predominantly in the Rakhine state, which also gives them access to the Bay of Bengal.
Right.
So strategic implications of this are also many. Number three, General Ling is not like the previous generals. He's not an Ewan. He has some amount of interest in having goodwill across international powers. Though, of course, Myanmar does believe that it has the right to make its unilateral decisions without external pressure. But he is not, let's say, as heavy-handed as we have seen Ne Win be. But so therefore he has courted he's courted China, he's courted even Russia, and Russia has just been given a port called the Dawei port, which is again the inclusion of another country that is coming in. We know that they have defense ties. Now coming to the West, the Americans are also obviously interested. We recently heard about the humanitarian corridor, which was to give aid from Bangladesh into Myanmar. It is also, if anybody was to look at it very strategically, you'd also say that it's also a way for them to have some influence in Myanmar, have some influence on the ethnic armed organizations, and they've always had that. The Burma 2020 Act under Biden provided money to the resistance forces. There was a TTP program, which was a temporary program for people who wanted to leave this conflict-ridden areas and take shelter in America. That program was extended to them. So America has supported the resistance. On the contrary, the NUG, the National Unity Government, who they supported, also has office in Washington, D.C. So there is no doubt about that. And I think what we must really realize, Sreeram, is Myanmar is a very, very interesting, strategically important, and a very influential region in Southeast Asia. It is rich in natural resources, critical earth mining happens a lot there. It gives access to countries, to the rest of the region. And therefore, everybody wants to have some sort of influence. And like you rightly said, that the US doesn't just want to counter China. Let me add, it also wants to counter a growing India.
Yeah, well, it's sad to see because we have a US-India comprehensive global strategic partnership and we are supposed to be coordinating. But on the eastern flank with Bangladesh and Myanmar, somehow things have not worked out between India and the US, and we would hope that things change. Coming to India now, you've already mentioned the Western and the Chinese. Now, we are seeing major spillover effect of this series of wars going on inside Myanmar. And we have refugees in our northeastern states who are pouring in from across the border, changing the demography. Manipur, Mizoram, especially these two states, these, like the back of your hand, you've worked there. And then we also have armed insurgents, moving across the borders. And sometimes our armed forces are also taking actions inside Myanmar. We have done surgical strikes in the past. So given that there is this fragmentation or the disintegration. A lot of these, like you mentioned, a lot of these rebel groups, ethnic armed organizations have become very powerful, and they are now probably like the de facto states in those in their respective turfs, right? So we are also now engaging with some of them, because we can't just say that we will only deal with whoever is ruling in Naypyidaw. So, what is your reading of the Indian approach now, and the challenges we are facing with this, raging war right next door, and what can we do proactively to try and contain these flames, so that they don't engulf us? We are also trying to, like, improve the fencing and the border security, but end of the day, the violence on that side, because of the ethnic and the tribal connections, it's not easy to disentangle these two sides, isn't it? So what should India be doing? I mean, we would wish for democracy, we would wish for one single Myanmar, and we would wish for stability, but none of these seems to be on the card. So we seem to be, in a difficult position ourselves.
So, Sriram, I've worked at the length and breadth of Myanmar. I have visited these areas. I've met locals. I've also visited the border areas. I have met locals on either of the side, trying to get an assessment of what they feel about the fencing. I have met with senior leadership in the Tatmadaw. I've met with the peace committees in Yangon. I've met with the ethnic armed organizations. The one thing that works for us in this entire scenario is the goodwill that India enjoys in Myanmar. I think we must never forget that, nor should we play it down, because the local common person feels closer to India for a couple of reasons. A, there's an entire generation that has studied in India. Aung San Suu Kyi, as you know very well,
yes,
was educated in India.
In Delhi University.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you went to LSR, like that, there have been many, many students who have studied in India. And I don't just mean people from Yangon or people from the major towns, but also from across the border, from Chin states, from Rakhine states. They've all come here to study. Medical facilities, they all again come to this side of the country for their medical facilities till date. The Buddhist connect, you cannot underplay that. Also, the fact that India has always been a good neighbor. Right. Nobody's ever worried about India. India doesn't have an expansionist agenda, and they've recognized that. So therefore, when the earthquake happened in May, and I was there, right, in the middle of the earthquake, when that happened, the destruction was massive and it was very sad. But within 24 hours, you had humanitarian aid from India on the ground, but you also had relief workers.
Operation Brahma.
Yes, and that, person to person connect, where you have relief workers on the ground, really, sort of again made alive the goodwill that is already on ground. However, like you said, there are these ethnic armed organizations, and like I mentioned earlier, there are over 200 of them. It's very difficult for you to build bridges with all 200. Also, all 200 aren't across your border. But we must remember that we are facing a sort of a crisis, not just because of a democratization process, but also because what Myanmar is being used for now, in terms of, let's say, the drug production. Earlier on, there was always a question, Sriram, how long are these militia groups going to run? We can cut down their, cut off their revenue systems. We can cut off their money and they'll, sort of, disintegrate. But not any longer, because Myanmar has become the hub of the biggest drug production in the world. And when I mean to say biggest drug production, I'm no longer talking about poppy cultivation and opium. I'm talking about methamphetamines. I'm talking about new drugs that are coming out on a daily basis. Yaba pills, which is a drug of the 70s, methamphetamine and codeine, it's a mixture, sells for $1 to $5. $1 to $5, Sriram, is nothing for anybody in this region. It's very, very little money for a child who's going to a party. This means nothing. And, they're little pills. So therefore, I think all of this will keep the conflict sustained. Money is not going to run out. They are going to be able to buy weapons. That is going to have an impact on our borders, where drugs come in from, weapons come in from. It's also going to, the conflict has also created a sense of there isn't, like I said, industry or economy. Therefore, there's going to be an economic problem where we are going to see refugees come to our end. That's going to cause problems internally. Our borders are 1,643 kilometers, Sriram. They are unfensible in totality. So I think India needs to be alert. Our forces are doing a great job, and diplomatic relations should continue with all stakeholders. And I think we will have to wait and watch as the situation evolves.
Right. So yeah, I mean, there are no easy answers, and like you say, we don't meddle or interfere. I mean, what the Chinese are doing, like they're playing sides and extracting the mineral wealth of Myanmar and plundering it. And India is not at all like that. But at the same time, we do need to read the situation and to be more proactive, and that's quite obvious. And we are now taking those steps. But ensuring stability and a unified Myanmar is probably beyond the capacity of any external player because of what we've discussed already, which is the ground situation and the fundamental incompatibility of the different armed groups as well as the military dominated state establishment. Myanmar is not a pretty picture, viewers. It's something that has haunted people for generations, but it is India's endeavor. It will be to bring about some kind of resolution to this endless cycle of wars, and we will be keen to look for diplomatic means to try and end these conflicts raging across our border. It's a very sensitive part of the northeast of India, which is adjoining Myanmar, and we will be therefore keen to make sure that the blowback effect of what's happening inside Myanmar does not continue to hurt us badly. But end of the day, it's a matter for the whole world. Dr. Rami Desai explained how it has gotten more attention internationally, but at the same time, still people don't know the nitty-gritty of what's happening on the ground in Myanmar. So I want to thank Rami Desai for sharing her insights based on ground level experiences and travels there. Thank you so much. You're doing courageous work. You're traveling in places where few would dare to tread, but we really admire that. And please keep up your great work as an anthropologist.
Thank you, Sriram, for having me. It's really been an honor.
So, viewers, this Myanmar is a cauldron and is likely to remain that way. Elections or no elections, we are not likely to see some kind of a settled or a stable or a secure Myanmar for a long time to come. It's now up to India and to other players to try and maybe coordinate, especially like-minded countries, to come up with a group solution, because it's beyond the capacity of any single country from outside to try and fix this mess. Among the fragile states, there's an index of fragile states done by Fund for Peace, an international institution. Myanmar ranks 11th out of almost 180 countries. It's in the same caliber and category as a Somalia or a Congo or a Yemen or an Afghanistan. So no easy solutions here, but India will have to be awake and alert as the situation develops. Thank you for watching. I'll see you again next time. Until then, take care.